welcome to my channel. I'm Chrissy, and today we're going to be talking about how to get a flawless base. So I'm going to show you how to do primer, foundation, concealer, bronzer, contour, highlight, all those types of things. Basically anything that's going to go on the face. So let's just get right into it. And before we get started, we have a tragedy in the family. Right before I went to film this video, my nail popped off. So mad, but please ignore that. Sorry, you have to look at it. So I have already moisturized my skin, which is a big step in your foundation looking flawless and really helping your foundation to sink into the skin and not show as much texture. So you definitely want to use some kind of a moisturizer. So I went in with the Urban Decay Rehab Makeup Prep Hot Springs Hydrating Gel. This is my favorite moisturizer. Although it is supposed to be a makeup base, I use this for skincare as well because this is the only thing that hydrates my skin enough to where I can actually feel and see a difference. So I went ahead and used that, and I've already done my eyebrows, and I put on a little bit of my Bite Agave lip mask. Prepping your lips, a lot of us forget to do that, but it is a good idea. Now I'm just going to touch my face and see if there's any excess oils or sometimes, although I have given my moisturizer ample time to sink in, it hasn't quite sunk in all the way. I feel like for the most part it has sunk in. But just in case, I'm going to go ahead and use a little blotting sheet. These are from NYX. You can use any blotting sheet. These are fairly inexpensive, but I do this step just to make sure that I don't have any excess oils on my face because I have combination skin. For the most part, most of my skin is dry except for right in my T-zone. And sometimes I go in with foundation, and as soon as I put it on my skin, it starts to break apart. So if you have that issue as well, as soon as you put your foundation on, it starts to break apart and look kind of funny, and it's just not seeping into the skin. Definitely try using a blotting sheet before you put your primer on. So what I'm going to do is grab a little of my NYX Dark Circle Corrector, and this is in the shade Deep. And I'm just going to use my finger since my nail is off. I'm going to put a little bit right there in the inner corner and then bring it down right where most of my darkness is. And I really love this because of the color. It is very creamy and emollient. It's very, very easy to blend. But I like to leave it there to set and kind of dry a little bit to get the most maximum amount of coverage that I can get out of it. Now I'm going to go in with my Milk Makeup Blur Stick. This is a pore filling primer. If you have dry skin, this will work for you. My skin's as dry as a desert. So I put this mostly in targeted areas and not all over my face, since I have already kind of prepped my face as far as moisturizing it. I don't need this everywhere. I just put it in the places where I have more pores or texture. So I'm going to be mixing my favorite combination right now, which is the Lancome Tint Idole Ultra Wear Foundation, and this is in the shade, I think this is Buff Nude. I'm not really sure. 215 Buff Nude. And then my LA Girl Pro Coverage HD Longwear Illuminating Foundation, and this is in Porcelain. This is more of a dewy foundation, and this is more of a matte foundation, so I like mixing the two because it makes more of a natural foundation. What I usually do is put one pump of each on the back of my hand. I'm also going to mix in a drop of this Bright Booster Oil Elixir from Physicians Formula. Looks like this. I really like using this as a makeup prep, but also as an oil. That was like about 1.5 drops. So I'm basically just going to dot this on the skin. But today I'm going to show you just like a basic kind of base that I would do. So grabbing my nude beauty blender. This is damp. If you have any kind of a sponge or a beauty blender, I definitely recommend using this. It's going to push it into the skin. It's going to give you the most flawless application. They have some at the drugstore, beauty sponges. You don't have to spend your money on a beauty blender, but using a sponge in general is going to give you the most flawless application in my opinion. You just want to blend this out and you want to pounce very gently on the skin. Make sure to get your hairline and underneath the jaw so there's no line of demarcation. Now if you have any problem areas like wrinkles on the forehead or problems with your foundation sinking into your smile lines or around your nose, my tip would be to put less product in those areas. Put on less amount of foundation and a small amount of powder, and I promise you it is not going to crease. But if you go in with just a huge layer of foundation and concealer and powder, you're bound to crease. So just putting on a smaller amount of product in those areas and really dabbing over them and making sure they're blended is gonna help those areas to not crease or to not look as prominent. So making sure my sponge is damp, and I'm just gonna very, very lightly dab over the color corrector now that it has dried and kind of set a little bit. Very, very light tapping motions. You don't want to pick up all the product that you've just put down, so you want to just very lightly tap over it. So next I'm going to go in with concealer. I think I'm just going to use my Tarte Shape Tape today. This is in the color Fair Neutral. A good drugstore option is a Maybelline Age Rewind Concealer. So I'm going to put a little bit right here, and then I'm going to put 3 dots underneath the eyes. That's quite a little bit on my Cupid's bow, a little bit on my chin, a little dot and a line, and then a little bit on my forehead. So it did pretty much a good job of covering up the little spots I had, but I'm just going to put a little dot there, and a little dot there. So with most foundations at this point, after putting it on my face and under my eyes, I would usually let it to set and dry a little bit before I blend it out. But with this foundation, it's pretty much already thick enough so you can go right in and start to blend it out. So I'm going to take this side of the beauty blender and just very gently pounce over that concealer. You want to make sure everything is really blended so you don't have any harsh lines. I'm going to go in with this side of the beauty blender, even though I usually use the other side, because I see some people use this side, so I'm interested. I'm going to put a few drops of oil onto the beauty blender. I like doing this technique because I find that this is so thick that it's a ton of coverage, but adding a little bit of oil makes it to where it's not so matte and not so drying on my under eyes. Because my under eyes are so dry, I find that the Tarte Shape Tape can sometimes make my eyes look a little bit older and more crepey. So I add a little bit of oil onto the beauty blender and then I start blending it out. I'm going to start at the inner corner here. Very light dabbing motions again. And then start doing the under eye, kind of squeezing the beauty blender. And the placement really matters when you're dealing with concealer and you have crepey under eyes. You want to keep it down as low as possible and keep most of your coverage there, because that's where your dark circles are going to be for most people. And then once you have blended out most of the product, then you want to bring it in to the lower lash line. And then I usually take like a clean side of my beauty blender and just tap over right along the lower lash line to make sure there's not too much product there. So you want to focus most of your product right where you have most of that darkness. A few more drops of my oil to go ahead and do the other side. I find that I don't need to set the outer half of my eyes because the Tarte Shape Tape is so matte. Even with the oil, I don't need to set it. And I find that if I do, I look even more crepey. I'm going to use my Bare Minerals powder duo. There's a matte side and a glow side. I'm going to go ahead and use the matte side. And I'm going to make sure that there is no creasing on my under eyes before I go in. So just very lightly. Very lightly tap over the entire area. And then I'm going to take my damp sponge and press into the powder. Up as far as I can and then start from the inner half of my eye going towards the inner corner and going back and forth, dipping in, going back and forth a few times, starting from the middle of the eye and moving my way in, and then going back and forth a few times, looking all the way up. I'm going to take my sponge and just blend out the rest of this concealer. Very light dabbing motions. So now that we've set the under eyes and I set my eyelids, I'm going to go in with a powder. This is a Maybelline Fit Me powder, and this is in the shade Fair. Because I'm going to be putting this over all the highlighted areas where we put concealer, I want to use a powder that's light and isn't too dark. So I'm going to use my dampened black beauty blender and dip this into the powder and kind of tap off the excess. And then I'm going to press this into the places I put concealer, which are also the places that tend to get oily on me. So I'm really going to lock these into place so that I don't get oily. I want to go around the nose lightly. I find putting too much powder there is going to cause cakiness and creasing. And then just really a tiny bit of powder for in the smile lines. You don't want to put too much. And then at this point, I would touch the rest of my face to see how tacky my skin is to decide how much powder I'm going to need. You don't want to use a matte foundation and then really powder down your skin if you have dry skin, because that's just going to emphasize all of your dryness and not really allow your skin to breathe and just make everything look way too cakey. So I'm going to use my Charlotte Tilbury Airbrush Flawless Finish Micro Perfecting or Skin Perfecting Micro Powder, and this is in the shade 1, which is Fair. This is an amazing powder. It is very smooth. It's more of a hydrating powder. The Wet n Wild Photo Focus Pressed Powder. This is a very light powder and not a ton kicks up on your brush, which makes it really nice if you have dry skin, so you're not going to over powder your face. Definitely check that one out if you can afford this, because this is quite expensive. So I'm just going to very lightly set my face in the areas where I didn't set it with the other powder. Today I'm going to use my Too Faced Chocolate Soleil bronzer, Milk Chocolate Soleil bronzer in the shade Light Medium, and this is a matte bronzer. I highly recommend using a matte bronzer because it looks so much more flattering on the skin. If you have pores, texture, or acne or scarring or wrinkles, fine lines, if you're putting a shimmery bronzer on your face, it's going to accentuate any of that texture or flaws on your face. So using a matte bronzer is really going to give you the most flawless finish. So I like using this Japanese brush. This is one of my favorite ones. It does shed, but I find it gives me the most flawless application because of the shape and the fact that the bristles aren't too densely packed. It comes to that kind of a point, and it just works beautifully. So what I do is I try to go above where my actual contour would be. So right above my cheekbone is where I start to bronze, so that way it doesn't end up going down too far. You just want to dip in a little bit on your brush, start back at the hairline and sweep forward so you're not going too far. You don't want your bronzer to go like really far towards the mouth. You want to keep it kind of back and just sweep it and swirl your brush around. And then you want to add a little bit on the forehead and just go in with smaller amounts of product, and you can build from there. If you go in with a ton of product, you're going to have a harder time blending it out, and it's just going to become one muddy mess. So starting like right above my ear, I like to kind of swirl it to make sure it's really blended. A little bit underneath the jaw. This isn't really contouring. It's more just adding warmth to your face. I'm going to use my Laura Geller Peach Glow highlight, which looks like this, with my Morphe Y14 brush. And I'm going to go right at the tops of my cheekbones, making sure to not bring it in too far, because that's where a lot of us have pores. And if you highlight in this area, it's just going to accentuate all of your pores. You don't want to bring it too far up towards the eye, or you're going to show any fine lines that you may have. If you have any kind of texture or pimples in this area, I would avoid putting highlighter here or anywhere that you might have any, or anywhere that you have any blemishes, because it's just going to highlight that area and make it look a lot worse. I'm going to add it on my chin, Cupid's bow. I'm actually going to dust off this bake. I'm just going to take this sheer powder brush from Luxie and dust off my face. I'm going to take the smallest amount, whatever's left over, and just add this onto the forehead right in the middle. I do have some fine lines here, so I like using something that's not too blinding. I'm going to go right over the top of the first highlighter, but mainly right at the tops of my cheek. Focusing it right here for the most part, and then just blending that out. And then down the nose, Cupid's bow, chin. This is from IBY Beauty or Ibby Beauty, I'm not sure. Looks like this. It came in my BoxyCharm. I actually really like this palette. I'm going to take my Morphe M507 brush, one of my favorite nose contouring brushes, and just tap into the product, tap off the excess. And I'm going to go, my nose is actually here. This is where the line of my nose is. So I'm going to cheat that and go in a little bit. So I'm going to start off up here and just make a line and bring it down. This brush comes to a slight point and is very fluffy, so it makes it easy to disperse your product and blend it out seamlessly. If you go in with a big brush and try to make just two stripes down your nose, it's going to end up looking funny. It's going to be hard to blend, and then you're going to end up blending it out to where you actually just have your natural nose shape. I see a lot of people with 11s down their nose, or just actually accentuating their nose's actual shape, which is hilarious. A lot of gurus don't know how to do nose contour. And then just a little bit underneath the nose. You want to make sure to bring it all the way up here into the brow bone so there isn't a disconnect. And then I'm going to take a little bit and just make a little ball right there. And you want to make sure and blend out all of the edges. And you don't want to when you're blending, you don't want to blend out over here where your nose actually is. You want to blend in to make your nose look smaller. So I'm not blending out here, I'm blending right there. And that's what's going to make your nose appear smaller. You want to start your lines not where your nose actually is, but in from your nose. I'm going to use my Marc Jacobs Air Blush in the shade Lines and Last Night. It's a very pretty pinky peachy blush. This is a Morphe E4 brush. It's very, very soft and just disperses the product beautifully. So I'm going to dip in quite a bit, and then I usually start kind of back here because I find if I bring it in too far, it can make me look a little bit aged. So just pressing the product into the skin, and I'm kind of merging my bronzer and my highlighter together. I find if I put my blush on before my highlighter, that my skin doesn't look as flawless. And whatever's left on the brush, I just kind of wiggle over my nose and then press into the temples. Then I'm going to take this Real Techniques setting brush, and I'm going to take the first and second shade, just a very small amount, tapping off the excess. And I'm going to start at the tops of my cheekbones and make kind of a C shape. I don't want to go straight because it looks kind of funny for my face shape if I just go straight. So I'm kind of going to go like this. Hopefully you can see, just like that. And we're just building a shadow right here. And I'm not going to go too far towards the mouth. It's not going to look natural. You really don't want to bring this too far or it can start to look muddy and very noticeable. You want to put small amount of product and build from there. So a good rule of thumb is just to start at the top of your ear and go in from there. So now we're going to set our face with some Max Fix Plus. I like to set my face with Fix Plus and then go in with a setting spray that's going to make my makeup last longer, like the Urban Decay All Nighter. I use the Chill one all the time because this is going to get rid of the powderiness and make your makeup become one with the skin. But a actual setting spray is going to make your makeup last longer. That one has dried, and that would be my finished look. Of course, we didn't do the eyes or the lips, but I just wanted to focus on the face today because I knew I had so much tips and things to talk through. Thank you so much for watching. That's all I have for you today. I hope you liked all the tips and tricks that I showed you. Try them out at home and just experiment. Things seem so much harder than what they are, but with these tips and tricks, I promise you your makeup will look so much more flawless. If you liked the video, please give me a thumbs up, comment down below, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye! So at this point, I would usually highlight So that's all I have for you guys today. Oh no, it's not.